Hello, this is James Arthur Ray, the author of the New York Times bestseller Harmonic Wealth, as well as my latest book, Life Unleashed: How to Live Life on Your Own Terms, Harness Your Unique Genius, and Have Maximum Impact on the World. Now, if you've read Life Unleashed, which I hope that you have, I talk about the topic of stress. And what I'd like to do here is I'd like for us to open up a conversation around this idea, this experience that I know that you've had called stress. You interested? I'd like to explore this over the next several weeks together. And I'd like to get into a variety of research from a variety of different scientific studies and fields that tell us things that maybe we're not aware of in all cases about this idea of stress. Now, one of the things that I talk about in Life Unleashed is that stress is not the enemy. The enemy is lack of recovery. Did you get that? Now, we'll talk more about that as this series unfolds. But there's also a second enemy. Maybe it's the first. It might be even primary. And let me say it this way. Stress is not the enemy. The enemy is your interpretation of stress or your mindset regarding stress. So we have two things: your mindset regarding stress and lack of recovery. And we'll explore each of those. The first place I want to dive in is the work of endocrinologist Hans Selye. Now, Selye conducted exhaustive research of stress upon the human body, how it affects the entire system. And what he found might really shock you. I know it was fairly shocking to me. Selye stated that there were two kinds of stress. There was what we'll call positive stress and let's call it negative stress. And the stress that we would typically call negative stress, the one that you're most familiar with, he called distress. Now, we've heard of this, right? Distress ultimately leads to dis-ease. It manifests in the body. And the field of psychoneuroimmunology has proven this to be true, that a large percentage of physical ailments and illness are related to stress upon the body. You know, not the least of which you've heard about most simply antioxidants, right? Antioxidants is just an attempt to oxidate the body or to mitigate the effect of oxidation on the body. And I know you've heard of antioxidants, blueberries, all those types of things. But all these things had to do with stress. So distress creates dis-ease over time. And that's the lack of recovery issue that we'll get to. But there's another kind of stress that Selye said is actually positive stress. And he called that eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S, eustress. And eustress, according to Selye's work, is that compelling pull that motivates you, inspires you, pulls you forward to create bigger, better, grander goals. Now, think about this. If there's two kinds of stress, don't you want to have eustress in your life? Of course you do. Don't you want those things that are going to compel you forward? Of course you do. And yet, the problem comes in with the mindset. Because Selye's work furthermore proves conclusively that positive stress and what we'll call negative stress, what we typically call negative stress, have the very same effect upon the body. Did you get that? I'm going to repeat it because it's so profound and it's important. Both positive and negative stress have the very same effect upon the body. So when something positive happens in your life, it stresses your body just as much as something negative. You say, wow, James, how can that be? You know, all my life I've been trying to avoid stress. Maybe you need to step back and reconsider. Now, let me dovetail in the research of psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. That's a mouthful, right? Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's work is extremely profound and extremely granular and extremely exhaustive around happiness, fulfillment, inspiration, and growth. And what his work proves is that the only time that you are really happy, fulfilled, inspired, engaged, and enthused is when you're stressed. In what you typically would define as stress. Now, Hans Selye would call that eustress, because Mihai Csikszentmihalyi says that you are most happy, engaged, inspired, enthused, and fulfilled when you are going after challenges, when you are pushing the envelope, if you will, of your own capabilities. You see, don't wish for an easier life. That's illusion. And you're not going to ever achieve it, because life is not meant to be easy. It's meant to be meaningful. And yet we've been conditioned. Here's the mindset. We've been conditioned into a mindset that tells us we will reach someday, at some time, when we receive the right guru or the right teacher or the secret sauce or the magic pill or the formula, right? That's going to magically make our life be problem and pain-free. Well, how long have you been alive, and how close are you to that one? It's not realistic. But you see, romanticism is not realistic either, is it? And we've been conditioned heavily. We've been sold a bill of goods, because Csikszentmihalyi's research conclusively proves that when you're at leisure, you're not the happiest, the most fulfilled, and the most engaged in life. You know, recent research proves that 71% of the people surveyed say they are not engaged, enthused, and inspired in their work. They're getting up every single day and dragging themselves to a job that they hate. They're just doing something to pay the bills. Is that you? Are you in the 71%? Furthermore, his research proves that we are not happy when we're at leisure. Even though we're conditioned to believe we want an easier life, even though we're conditioned to believe we want more free time, even though we're conditioned to believe we want more vacations, we want to kick back more. The fact of the matter is, and this is research-based, is that you're most happy, fulfilled, and inspired and engaged when you're facing adversity and challenges. That's eustress. That's the stress that causes you to grow, advance, become more. Why? Because you are a spiritual being having a physical experience. Chardin told us that years and years ago. As a spiritual being, you have one objective: fuller expansion. Expansion of what? Consciousness and awareness. Fuller experience. Greater experiences come from greater challenges, because if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. And greater and fuller expression. Your one soul, S-O-L-E, as well as S-O-U-L, objective is fuller expansion, experience, and expression. And that only comes through eustress. That only comes through a new mindset that says, I don't want an easier life. What I want is greater capacity and capability to get through the challenges that life brings my way. Because that's what you really want. That's when you're really engaged. That's when you're really fired up. And I know that makes sense to you. Check your own history. So maybe the first step in dealing with stress is not to attempt to avoid stress, but it's to reframe stress. It's to look at it in a more awakened and aware way. That's the first step of spirit, expansion. Expansion of awareness. To see life clearly, exactly as it is. To not wish for an easier life, but to say, I want a meaningful life. And I know that meaning is carved in the crucible of challenge. I hope I've given you some things to think about. This series is going to continue for the next several weeks because it's so critically profound and important. I hope I've given you, again, some things to think about, some things to put into practice. Until we speak again, stay awake, love life, and be epic.